Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Houghton, and today in this presentation I am going to demonstrate my understanding of child protection and the knowledge and skills that are required in relation to the case study provided. It is important to remember that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, and while the local authorities play a lead role, everyone who comes into contact with a child and their families has a role to play, both in preventative work and interventions to protect the child from harm. We're now going to go through some relevant areas of study relating to child protection, and I've listed these here, and I will go through each one of them. There's a wide range of areas to child protection that anyone working with children need to be aware of, and these next slides will go through some of them for you. First of all, we have legislation. There are many laws and guidance which are continually being amended, updated and revoked. Laws that are amended by a new legislation are passed by Westminster and become statutory law, which means that local authorities or relevant organisations are required to follow the details of guidance or a code. Department for Education is responsible for children's services and education, including higher and further education policy, apprenticeships and wider skills in England. And the first new legislation was the Children Act 1989, which governs child protection procedures and allocates duties to local authorities, parents and other agencies in the UK to ensure children are safeguarded and their welfare is promoted. I will go into more detail regarding the relevant legal and policy frameworks later on in the presentation. Next, we've got the anti-discriminatory practice, and this is meant to counter discrimination in the UK based on race, class, gender, disability, and to promote equality. Policies and procedures. We've all heard about these. These are step-by-step procedures for staff to follow in the day-to-day operation of the organisation. They are guidelines adopted by an organisation to reach long-term goals, and they influence all major decisions and actions. Next, we have the theoretical perspectives and models that inform practice. These are the perspectives and models which have been evidenced through theories and scientific methods, and I will go through a couple of these later on. Then we all have our own values, ethics and skills, but it is very important to make sure we respect each and every person, no matter of their individual beliefs and values. Recent cases relating to the child protection. I'm sure many of you have heard of many cases in the news relating to child protection, with the most horrific being the case of Baby P in 2007 and Daniel Palka, who died in 2012, to name just two. There is a technique that supports the learning process in organisations through reflection, sharing and questioning, and is known as action learning. It is important to remember that the learning process will be different for everyone, as it is individual to you, so there is no right way. It is not just about the knowledge you have, but also the skills, beliefs and values. It is important to learn from experience, failure and success, and if something needs changing, don't be scared to change it. There is no learning without change. To be an effective learner, it is important to inquire, listen and question. Action learning was derived by Kolb's learning cycle, which we can see on the slide behind me, and he believed that learning is achieved through experience, the process of reflection and by taking action. Planning for learning, action learning, means that you need to schedule time, maybe in the form of a meeting, to discuss the child protection policies and procedures discrimination on a regular basis to ensure that you continually improve. This will allow you to define different areas of study relating to child protection and allocate the work to the staff with the relevant skills and experience. Don't try and do it all yourself. Organisations will have their own templates to use for action plans. It is important that these are used to allocate work and then to keep a track on the progress. The next slide will show an example of a child protection action plan in relation to the case study. So we had a case study given to us, and I have come up with an action plan here, and I have used the RAG report, which some of you may be already aware of, where the red stands for actions that are overdue, and on mine I don't have any of those. Amber is actions due for completion, which I do have one that's pending here, and the green whereby the action is either completed or on schedule, and I've got two actions already completed here. It is important that if you do have any red, that you make sure notes are on the bottom of your action plan so the other people can have a look at it, and they may be able to help you to get that out of red or may have more information for you. Following Emma having to be admitted to hospital for tests, she was found to be suffering from malnutrition, and this meant that a district nurse visited the day nursery to discuss Emma's care with her key worker, and also was informed that at the time that the social worker would also be supporting Emma's family as there were other issues in the family life. This is why a child protection action plan is required, so that not only Emma is safe, but all parties are able to support Emma's family as well as the key worker. And I have a copy of the case study for your information if you would like to read it in full, and you can see where I've come from the action plan from that. Next we go into legal and policy frameworks relating to child protection. I won't go through the Department for Education again, we've already gone through this one, but it is important to think about that apart from parents and carers, close family friends and other family members, practitioners probably get to see children and young people more than any other person. So the most recent piece of legislation is Working Together to Safeguard Children. This was published in 2015. This legislation shows how organisations and individuals should work together to safeguard and promote the welfare of children and young people in accordance with the Children Act 2004. Then we have the Local Safeguarding Children Board. In line with statutory guidance, each local authority has an LSCB, which produce local policies and procedures for interagency to work together and agree on how they will cooperate in order to safeguard and promote the welfare of children. These replace the area child protection committees. Next we have the Child Protection Plan. There are 6 processes to the child protection, and a child protection plan is drawn up at step 4 as a result of a child protection conference if it gets that far. The plan determines the contribution of different professionals and is a working tool that should enable the family and professionals to understand what is expected of them and what they can expect of others. In front of you now I have a step 1 to 6 process flow, which you can see. So first step would be the concern about the child, and then we have the different actions of yes questions and no questions, and then we go to step 2 is the initial inquiries and the strategies. Step 3 is the investigation and the assessment, and step 4, as I've gone through in more detail, is where the Child Protection Conference happens, and following that this is where the Child Protection Action Plan comes into place. And then we go down to step 6, this is the Child Protection Review Conference. Next we've got the legal and policy framework timeline. Well, we've got quite a few of those. So the Department for Education is responsible for child protection in England, as we've already discussed, and it sets out the policy legislation and the statutory guideline on how the child protection system should work. I will now outline a brief overview of the legislative timeline. You will see similar patterns occur, whereby something terrible usually has to happen before the government releases a change in the legislation in order to protect vulnerable children. Legislation has developed over time, with the first Act of Parliament for the Preventive of Cruelty to Children in 1889, known as the Children's Charter, followed by the Children's Act in 1908. This established juvenile courts and introduced the registration of foster parents. The first formal child death inquiry in 1945 meant that a children's committee and a children's officer in each local authority was established. But as we now know that they were later replaced by the LSCB. Once again, following the death of another child in 1973 meant that modern child protection system was established. And in 1984, further changes were implemented following further deaths. In 1989, the Children Act established the legislative framework for the current child protection system in England and Wales, followed by the Protection of Children Act passed in 1999, which aimed to prevent paedophiles from working with children. 2000 saw the framework for assessment of children in need and their families, and followed the death of Victoria Clibby, led by the Lord Lehman report. which resulted in several changes to the way children's services were structured. Unfortunately, several high-profile child deaths occurred between 2000 and 2003 and saw the publication of the Green Paper, Every Child Matters. 2006 saw the Early Years Foundation stage, established under the Childcare Act 2006. And then we had the Equality Act, which was published in 2010 and meant that public authorities are responsible in eliminating discrimination and for promoting equality of opportunity, along with the new Working Together guidelines. 2014 saw the Children and Families Act introduce a number of reforms to the original 2010 Act. 2015 saw several new guidelines working together, what to do if you're worried about that a child is being abused, and then the updated guidance on keeping children safe in education. There are many reports that can be read about the deaths of some of the children, for example, Baby P, Victoria Klimby, and Daniel Pauker. In some cases, the reports show that the child was known to the social care services, and in some cases, even on the child protection register. But unfortunately, the system let the child down, whereby medical professionals were absent from important meetings, so no proper investigation was made on the adults living at the same home at the time. This is where your child protection action plan comes into play, because that would be a red because somebody important didn't attend the meeting. The Department of Health is obliged to commission regular overviews of any serious case reviews following avoidable deaths or serious injuries to children. As you can see, there are many legislations and guidelines, and they have changed considerably over the last 50 years. This is due to the society beginning to be more aware of what has been going on and now attempting to do something about it. It's helped by the high-profile cases that's been involved recently with celebrities, because this has put safeguarding under the spotlight where it should be. Some legislations will require you to have further understanding, and the one that I would recommend would be Working Together to Safeguard Children, which was updated in March 2015. It details that all professionals, practitioners, settings providers to notify the agencies with statutory responsibilities without delay if they have any concerns about child safety or welfare. We have serious case reviews. These are statutory guidance is for all professionals who come into contact with young children and is very relevant to early years staff, family care workers, social workers and teachers. It details that staff should be aware of risks that abusers may pose to children and to share the information to the appropriate staff and agencies. Remember, serious case reviews are required so that when things go wrong, lessons are learned from the mistakes that were made. Then we go into the Public Interest Disclosure Act. Now, you may know this as the Whistleblowing Act. This protects you if you wish to raise concerns about actions or methods in your own organisation. It may not be about safeguarding. It is important, though, that if at first you really need to go and speak to and discuss these matters with your supervisor in the first instance. Then lastly, we have the Prevent Duty in 2015, and this was a new legislation. All schools and registered early years providers have to due regard to prevent children being drawn into terrorism. Prevent will be part of the existing school safeguarding framework. Next, we're going to go into some theoretical perspectives relating to child protection that inform practice. And we could ask that horrible question, why are children abused? There are many theories, and I will attempt to outline a few in this next slide. One common theory is the cycle of abuse theory, which suggests that if a parent was abused themselves as a child, they are then likely to become the abuser themselves. This is Walker, 1979. This theory was thought to be revolutionary at the time, however, some thought it was a little bit simplistic. Walker's model was based on 4 stages, whereby Scott Allen Johnson broke his down further into 14 stages, which gave a deeper insight to the emotions. Then we had the attachment theory, John Bowlby, in the late 1950s. And this was the most studied theory. Bowlby assumed that if the parents' carers were kind and passionate, so will be their children. However, Harris did not believe this as he felt that children learnt from their peers more than their parents. This was when the relationship that babies develop with their mother in the early stages of life. Studies show that there are serious effects on the children if were separated from their main carer in these stages. Other theorists thought that Bowlby didn't carry out enough observations in different circumstances to get a clear view of the attachment theory. This is when James and Joyce Robertson continued to investigate this theory, and Mary Ainsworth was interested in the quality of the attachment process, and she then followed through with the strange situation experiment. And this is where I've got the strange, the step-by-step procedures there. Unfortunately, Ainsworth's theory lacked validity because it was a strange situation, stressful for the child and or parent. However, it can be seen as useful if attachment problems were identified early enough, meaning early intervention may help. Next, we have the social learning model by Albert Bandura. This model I've gone through before in greater detail in a previous presentation, but this experiment with the Bobo dolls showed that if a child witnesses violent, inappropriate behaviour, they will copy it themselves. On evaluation of this model, is that it is believed that a child's negative behaviour can change according to their surroundings and environment. Next, we have the environmental stress model, the ecological systems theory, and this researched into the reasons for child maltreatment. Then we have the systems model, the theoretical model for child protection. Adapting a systems approach to child protection, key concepts and consideration was published by UNICEF in 2010, which looked at all the different systems within which children exist. There are a lot of theories and models that have been extensively researched. They give the opportunity of the practitioner to look at the children in different ways. Not one model fits all situations. Different circumstances can give different answers. All theories have their own strengths and limitations, so it is recommended that all practitioners use a range of theories to help them work with the child in question. I know that was an extensive presentation and a lot of information to take in, but I do hope you do find it useful. Thank you for listening, and please do wait around if there's any further questions. Thank you.